Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, October 18th, 2024, and you're listening to Alex's News. The high in Riverside today will reach 78.2 degrees, with a low of 66.7, making for a pleasant autumn day. Coming up on Alex's News, we'll explore the impact of Russia's nuclear rhetoric on Western support for Ukraine. We'll also examine California's new rent control legislation and its potential effects on the housing market. Finally, we'll look at how medications designed for weight loss could potentially transform addiction treatment. Stay tuned for these stories and more on Alex's News. We turn now to a concerning development in international affairs. Russia's nuclear posturing has been making headlines as tensions with Ukraine continue to escalate. Joining us to discuss this is our foreign affairs correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, can you give us an overview of Russia's nuclear capabilities?
Certainly, Grace. According to reporting from Yahoo News via the Associated Press, Russia currently possesses the world's largest atomic arsenal. They have an estimated 5,580 deployed and non-deployed nuclear warheads, which is slightly more than the United States' inventory of 5,044 warheads.
That's a staggering number, Ethan. How does Russia deploy these weapons?
Russia maintains what's known as a nuclear triad, GRACE. This consists of ground-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, long-range bombers, and ICBM-armed submarines. It's a diverse and formidable arsenal that has seen significant upgrades since Vladimir Putin came to power in 2000.
Can you elaborate on these upgrades?
Certainly. Russia has been actively modernizing its Soviet-era nuclear components. This includes deploying new land-based missiles like the Yars and Sarmat ICBMs, the latter of which is also known as Satan II. They've also been commissioning new nuclear submarines and modernizing their nuclear-capable bombers.
That's quite concerning. Are there any other types of nuclear weapons we should be aware of?
Yes, Grace. In addition to their strategic nuclear weapons, Russia is believed to have between 1,000 and 2,000 tactical nuclear weapons. These are smaller, shorter-range weapons that could potentially be used on the battlefield. They include high-precision Iskander missiles and hypersonic Kinzhal missiles.
How has Russia's nuclear doctrine changed in recent years?
That's an important point, Grace. Putin has actually lowered the threshold for using nuclear weapons in Russia's nuclear doctrine. The new doctrine considers a conventional attack supported by a nuclear power as a joint attack on Russia, and leaves open the possibility of a nuclear response to a massive air attack. This is a significant shift that has raised concerns in the international community.
Given all of this, how has the West responded in terms of supporting Ukraine?
Despite Russia's nuclear posturing, Western countries have continued to provide significant military aid to Ukraine. This includes air defense systems like NASAMS and Patriot, various artillery systems, anti-tank weapons, drones, tanks, and multiple rocket launch systems. The Daily Star reports that this aid has been substantial and ongoing.
Has Russia's nuclear posturing had any effect on this support?
The evidence is mixed, Grace. While there may have been some initial caution and delays in providing certain types of aid, Western countries have generally continued to increase their military support for Ukraine over time. However, there is still caution in the use of long-range weapons and a careful management of the risk of escalation.
How serious is the current situation, Ethan?
It's quite serious, Grace. According to WPXI News, U.S. President Joe Biden has noted that the prospect of nuclear war is at its highest since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The situation remains tense, and the international community is watching closely.
Thank you, Ethan, for that comprehensive overview of this critical situation. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops.
Thank you, Grace.
And that's story 1 of 3 for today. Stay with us for more news after the break. Now we turn to a contentious issue on the California ballot this November. Proposition 33, the rent control measure, has been generating significant debate. Joining us to discuss this is our political correspondent, Chloe. Chloe, can you give us an overview of what Proposition 33 entails?
Certainly, Grace. Proposition 33, also known as the Prohibit State Limitations on Local Rent Control Initiative, is set to appear on the California ballot on November 5th, which is 18 days from now. If passed, it would repeal the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995, effectively expanding local government's authority to enact rent control on residential properties.
What specific changes would this proposition bring about?
The measure would allow cities and counties to maintain, enact, or expand residential rent control ordinances without state limitations. This means they could impose rent control on any type of housing, including single-family homes and condos, and even limit rent increases when new tenants move in.
That sounds like a significant change. What are the projected economic impacts of this proposition?
According to economic analyses, the measure is expected to result in a reduction in local property tax revenues of at least tens of millions of dollars annually. This is due to the likely expansion of rent control in some communities.
I see. Now, what are the main arguments for and against Proposition 33?
Supporters argue that it would help make housing more affordable, stabilize rents, and address homelessness. They claim that for every 5% increase in rent, 2,000 more people fall into homelessness. On the other hand, opponents, including the California Apartment Association and the California Chamber of Commerce, argue that repealing Costa-Hawkins could discourage investment in new housing, constrain supply, and drive up overall housing costs.
It seems like there's quite a bit of money being poured into this campaign. Can you tell us about the funding situation?
Absolutely. The campaign dynamics are quite interesting. Opponents of Prop 33, largely from the real estate industry, have raised over $92 million, with the California Apartment Association spending more than $56 million. Supporters, led by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, have raised around $50 million.
This isn't the first time California has seen a rent control measure on the ballot, is it?
You're right, Grace. This is actually the third attempt to pass a statewide rent control measure, following failed attempts in 2018 with Proposition 10 and in 2020 with Proposition 21. Both previous measures were defeated with about 60% of voters opposing them.
Given the history, what are economists saying about the potential long-term impacts of rent control?
Most economic analyses suggest that rent control policies do not improve housing affordability and availability in the long term. Studies indicate that rent control often leads to reduced housing supply, decreased maintenance and quality of existing housing, and discouragement of new development. There's also concern about inequitable distribution of benefits, often favoring existing tenants at the expense of new or potential renters.
Are there any alternative solutions being proposed?
Yes, experts have suggested several alternatives. These include increasing housing supply through reduced regulatory barriers, providing direct financial assistance to needy renters, and implementing targeted programs to subsidize affordable housing construction or rehabilitation.
Thank you, Chloe, for that comprehensive overview of Proposition 33. It's certainly a complex issue that voters will need to consider carefully.
You're welcome, Grace. It's indeed a multifaceted issue with significant implications for California's housing market.
Thanks again, Chloe. We'll be sure to keep our viewers updated as we approach the November 5th election. Here are some other headlines. CVS Health CEO Karen Lynch is stepping down amid significant company challenges. The company has cut financial expectations for the third time this year, citing higher-than-expected medical costs. David Joyner, a veteran executive, will replace Lynch as CEO. The Texas Supreme Court issued a rare stay of execution for Robert Roberson, who was convicted of murdering his 2-year-old daughter in 2002. The stay allows Roberson to testify before a Texas House committee regarding concerns about the scientific evidence used in his conviction. Wealthier Americans are driving retail spending and powering the U.S. economy. Upper-income households' inflation-adjusted spending on retail goods has increased nearly 17% since January 2018, contributing significantly to overall economic growth. An American National, Elliot O'Neill Eastman, was allegedly abducted from the southern Philippine town of Cebuco. The 26-year-old from Vermont was reportedly shot in the leg and taken away in a speedboat by armed individuals impersonating police officers. Local authorities are conducting a search operation. A 3-judge panel in Tennessee ruled that doctors who provide emergency abortions to protect the mother's life cannot be disciplined, while a lawsuit challenging the state's abortion ban is ongoing. The ruling specifies certain pregnancy-related conditions as medical necessity exceptions, but does not include exceptions for fetal abnormalities or survivors of rape or incest. We turn now to a developing story in the medical field that could have far-reaching implications for addiction treatment. A new study suggests that popular weight loss drugs like Ozempic might have potential in treating alcohol and drug abuse. Joining us to discuss this groundbreaking research is our health correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, what can you tell us about this study?
Thank you, Grace. This is indeed a fascinating development. According to reporting from news-medical.net, a recent study published in the journal Addiction has found some promising evidence that medications like Ozempic, known generically as semaglutide, could potentially be used to treat substance abuse disorders.
That's intriguing, Ethan. Can you give us more details about the study's findings?
Certainly, Grace. The study, which analyzed health records of over 1 million people with substance use disorders, uncovered some remarkable results. For instance, individuals with opioid use disorder who were prescribed GLP-1 medications like Ozempic had a 40% lower rate of opioid overdoses compared to those not taking these medications.
That's a significant reduction. Were there any findings related to alcohol abuse?
Yes, there were. The study found that people with alcohol use disorder who were taking these drugs experienced a 50% reduction in episodes of alcohol intoxication or binge drinking. These are truly remarkable numbers, Grace.
Indeed they are. But Ethan, can you explain how a weight loss drug could potentially affect addiction?
That's a great question, Grace. The mechanism is quite interesting. These GLP-1 medications, like Ozempic, work by mimicking hormones that control blood sugar and promote feelings of fullness. However, they also interact with the mesolimbic system in the brain, which is involved in addictive behaviors. Experts believe this interaction may reduce cravings by affecting the brain's reward pathways.
That's fascinating. Are there any experts weighing in on these findings?
Yes, several experts have commented on the study. Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford from Massachusetts General Hospital and Dr. David Liu from the University of Calgary have both expressed support for the study's findings. They've highlighted the potential benefits of these medications in reducing addictive behaviors.
This sounds promising. But are there any caveats we should be aware of?
Absolutely, Grace. It's crucial to note that these drugs are not currently FDA approved for treating addiction. Additionally, while the results are encouraging, experts emphasize the need for further research. The current findings are based on observational data and don't establish causality. Randomized clinical trials are necessary to confirm the efficacy and safety of these medications for treating addiction.
Are any such trials currently underway?
Yes, according to the Financial Times, several clinical trials are currently in progress, including one led by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. These trials will be crucial in determining whether these medications can be safely and effectively used for addiction treatment.
What about potential risks or side effects?
That's an important point, Grace. As with any medication, there are potential risks and side effects to consider. GLP-1 medications can cause gastrointestinal issues, pancreatitis, gallbladder problems, and kidney issues. Long-term effects, including potential cancer risks, are still being studied.
It sounds like there's still a lot to learn about this potential new application for these drugs. Ethan, in your view, what's the broader significance of this research?
Well, Grace, this research is part of a broader trend exploring the potential of GLP-1 medications beyond their primary use in treating obesity and diabetes. If further studies confirm these initial findings, it could open up new avenues for addiction treatment, potentially offering alternatives in areas where traditional therapies have been less effective. However, it's important to emphasize that while the study shows promise, more rigorous clinical trials are needed to solidify these findings and assess long-term safety and efficacy.
Thank you, Ethan, for this comprehensive report on this potentially game-changing research. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on future developments in this area.
You're welcome, Grace. It's definitely a story worth following closely.
Indeed it is. Thanks again, Ethan. And that concludes our third and final story for this segment. Stay tuned for more news after the break. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.5, the Perplexity API Malay, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API Malay. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.